The Valdorian Empire had ruled 17 star systems for over 3 millennia, and in all that time, they had never encountered a species quite as puzzling as the humans of Terra. Commander Zara Kelthax stood before the massive viewing portal of the orbital station Nexus Prime, watching the blue-green planet slowly rotate beneath her. Her silver-scaled hands were clasped behind her back, her reptilian features set in an expression of controlled disgust. The humans were an emotional mess. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. In the 6 months since the Valdorians had established their protectorate over Terra, they had documented thousands of instances of humans inexplicably leaking salt water from their optical organs. The behavior was not only primitive and unsanitary, but it was spreading like a contagion throughout the human population. What had started as isolated incidents was now occurring in epidemic proportions across every human settlement on the planet. Zara's communication device chirped softly. She touched the bio-luminescent panel on her wrist, and the holographic image of her superior, High Administrator Vex Morlian, materialized before her. His imposing figure filled the space with an aura of absolute authority that had commanded respect across the galaxy for decades. Commander Kelthax. Vex's voice resonated with the deep, harmonic tones characteristic of their species. I trust you have prepared the comprehensive report on the human contamination issue. Zara straightened her already perfect posture. Yes, High Administrator. The situation has deteriorated significantly since our last communication. The optical fluid discharge phenomenon has spread to approximately 73% of the human population. Our xenobiologists have confirmed that the behavior is not caused by any pathogenic agent, yet it continues to proliferate at an alarming rate. Vex's 4 eyes narrowed simultaneously, a sign of extreme displeasure among their kind. This is unacceptable. The Valdorian Empire has maintained order and civilization across 17 systems by eliminating such primitive emotional displays. We cannot allow Terra to become a source of contamination that might spread to our other protectorates. The High Administrator paused, his scaled fingers drumming against an unseen surface. The Council of Hierarchs has reached a decision. Effective immediately, all human optical fluid discharge is banned. Any human caught engaging in this primitive behavior will face immediate correction. We will not tolerate such weakness in our domain. Zara felt a flutter of concern in her secondary stomach, though she would never dare express such an emotion. High Administrator, with respect, our behavioral modification protocols have shown limited success with humans. Their psychological structure is remarkably resistant to standard compliance procedures. Then we will implement enhanced measures, Vex replied coldly. Deploy the emotion suppression fields across all human population centers. Install biomonitors on every human above the age of maturation. Any detection of optical fluid discharge will trigger immediate intervention. We will cure them of this weakness, Commander, whether they wish to be cured or not. The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving Zara alone with her troubling thoughts. She had served the Valdorian Empire faithfully for over 2 centuries, helping to bring order and civilization to countless primitive worlds. Yet something about the humans troubled her in ways she couldn't quite articulate. Their emotional displays were indeed primitive and inefficient, but there was something else about them that her scientific training couldn't categorize. Dr. Sarah Chin sat in her small office in the underground medical facility beneath New Geneva, staring at the data streaming across her computer screens. As one of Terra's leading neurobiologists, she had been secretly studying the Valdorian occupation and its effects on human physiology for months. What she had discovered would have been considered treason by their alien overlords, but Sarah knew that someone had to document what was really happening to her species. The Valdorians had arrived on Terra with overwhelming technological superiority and a mandate to bring their version of civilization to humanity. They claimed to be benevolent protectors, offering advanced technology and galactic citizenship in exchange for human compliance with their social and behavioral codes. Most governments had surrendered without firing a shot, seeing no alternative to cooperation with beings who could travel between stars. But Sarah had noticed something the Valdorians either couldn't see or chose to ignore. The humans who cried weren't exhibiting weakness or primitive behavior. They were demonstrating something far more complex and sophisticated than the aliens realized. The tears that the Valdorians found so disgusting were actually expressions of a neurological and emotional complexity that surpassed anything in the known galaxy. Her research had begun accidentally while treating patients suffering from what the Valdorians called optical discharge syndrome. Sarah had expected to find evidence of psychological trauma or physiological malfunction. Instead, she had discovered that crying humans showed increased activity in brain regions associated with empathy, social bonding, creativity, and problem-solving. The more emotionally expressive a human was, the more neurologically sophisticated they appeared to be. The door to her office slid open, and Dr. Marcus Rodriguez entered with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Marcus had been her research partner since before the occupation, and one of the few people she trusted with her dangerous discoveries. "Sarah, you need to see this," Marcus said, setting a data tablet on her desk. "I've been analyzing the brain scans from the resistance members who were captured last month. Every single one of them shows the enhanced neural activity patterns we've been tracking. The ones who cry the most are also the ones who've been most successful at evading Valdorian detection and organizing underground networks." Sarah examined the data with growing amazement. The correlation was undeniable and startling. The humans who the Valdorians considered most effective were actually the most neurologically advanced members of their species. It was as if emotional expression and cognitive sophistication were linked in ways that current scientific understanding couldn't explain. "There's more," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been monitoring the Valdorian communication networks. They're planning to implement something called enhanced correction protocols within the next 48 hours. From what I can decipher, they're going to start using some kind of neural suppression technology to forcibly prevent humans from crying." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. If her research was correct, suppressing human emotional expression wouldn't just eliminate a behavior the Valdorians found objectionable. It would fundamentally alter human consciousness itself, potentially lobotomizing the most creative and empathetic members of their species. She activated her secure communication system and sent an encrypted message to a network of scientists and physicians around the world who had been quietly documenting the effects of Valdorian rule. The message was simple but urgent. "They're going to try to stop us from crying. We need to meet. Emergency protocols." 3,000 kilometers away, in the hidden research facility beneath the ruins of Tokyo, Dr. Kenji Nakamura received Sarah's message while studying tissue samples from humans who had been subjected to Valdorian behavioral modification. Kenji had spent his career studying the neurochemistry of emotion, and what he had discovered about human tears would have revolutionized psychology if the world hadn't been invaded by aliens who considered emotions to be a disease. Human tears, Kenji had learned, contained a complex mixture of proteins, hormones, and neural transmitters that served functions far beyond simple waste elimination. When humans cried together, they were actually engaging in a form of biochemical communication that created powerful social bonds and enhanced group problem-solving abilities. The tears themselves acted as a medium for transferring emotional and even cognitive information between individuals. More remarkably, Kenji had discovered that different types of crying produced chemically distinct tears. Tears of sadness carried different molecular signatures than tears of joy, which were different again from tears of empathy or frustration. Each type of tear appeared to trigger specific responses in other humans who came into contact with them, either through airborne particles or direct contact. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just crying because they were emotional. They were engaging in a sophisticated form of chemical communication that allowed them to share complex psychological states and coordinate their responses to threats or opportunities. It was a form of collective intelligence that operated below the level of conscious awareness, but enhanced human cognitive and social capabilities in ways the Valdorians couldn't imagine. Kenji's research had led him to a conclusion that would have sounded like science fiction before the occupation. Human crying was actually an advanced biological technology that had evolved over millions of years to enable collective problem-solving and emotional processing. The Valdorians weren't just trying to eliminate a primitive behavior. They were attempting to disable a critical component of human consciousness and social organization. He encrypted his latest findings and transmitted them to Sarah's network, knowing that the information might be humanity's only hope of understanding what they were really fighting for. The Valdorians saw crying as a sign of weakness and primitiveness, but Kenji's research suggested it was actually evidence of a form of consciousness more sophisticated than anything the galaxy had ever encountered. In the Valdorian command center orbiting Terra, Senior Scientist Valdorian reviewed the final preparations for the emotion suppression deployment. As the Empire's leading expert on biological modification and behavioral control, X had overseen the pacification of dozens of species across the galaxy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The humans would be no different from the others, once their primitive emotional responses were properly regulated. The emotion suppression fields would work by emitting targeted electromagnetic frequencies that interfered with human neural activity in the regions of the brain associated with emotional expression. The technology had been tested and refined on hundreds of other species, and it had never failed to produce compliant, rational populations that could be easily integrated into the Valdorian social order. X's scaled fingers danced across the holographic control interface, making final adjustments to the suppression field generators that had been installed in orbit around Terra. Each generator was the size of a small moon and capable of blanketing entire continents with the neural suppression frequencies. Once activated, every human on the planet would find themselves incapable of producing tears or experiencing the intense emotional states that the Valdorians found so disturbing. "Senior Scientist," came a voice from behind him. X turned to see junior researcher Tyle Keshen approaching with a datapad. Tyle was young for a Valdorian scientist, barely past his first century, and still retained some of the curiosity that older researchers learned to suppress in favor of efficiency. "What is it, Researcher Keshen?" X asked, not bothering to hide his impatience. The emotion suppression deployment was scheduled to begin in less than 6 hours, and he had no time for the questions of junior staff. "Sir, I've been analyzing the preliminary data from the biomonitors we've placed on human subjects, and I've noticed some unusual patterns. The humans who engage in optical fluid discharge most frequently also show elevated activity in brain regions associated with problem-solving and social coordination. I was wondering if we should investigate further before implementing the suppression fields." Chuan's expression hardened. "Researcher Keshen, you are exhibiting the same dangerous curiosity that led to your assignment to this remote posting. The humans are a primitive species whose emotional instability makes them unsuitable for integration into civilized society. The correlation you have observed is meaningless. Emotional behavior and cognitive sophistication are mutually exclusive. This is a fundamental principle of Valdorian science." Tyle shifted uncomfortably but pressed on. "But sir, the data suggest that human emotional expression might be more complex than our models predict. Perhaps we should conduct additional research before implementing permanent modifications to their neural architecture." "Enough," X snapped. "You will cease this line of inquiry immediately and focus on your assigned duties. The Empire's xenobiologists have studied emotional species for millennia. We know exactly what we are dealing with. The humans will be better served by the elimination of their primitive responses, just as every other species has been improved by our guidance." Tyle nodded reluctantly and retreated to his workstation, but privately he continued to study the human data that troubled him so deeply. The patterns he was seeing in human brain activity during emotional episodes didn't match anything in the Valdorian scientific literature. If anything, the humans appeared to be accessing cognitive resources that Valdorians themselves didn't possess. But questioning established scientific doctrine was a career-ending offense in the Empire, and Tyle valued his position too much to pursue his concerns openly. Back on Terra, Zara Chen stood before a gathering of 37 of the planet's most brilliant scientists, physicians, and researchers in a hidden chamber deep beneath the Swiss Alps. The facility had been built in secret over the past 6 months, using a network of caves and tunnels that predated human civilization. It was one of several such facilities hidden around the world, all connected by quantum-encrypted communication networks that the Valdorians couldn't detect. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible," Zara began, her voice echoing slightly in the stone chamber. "But our research has uncovered something about human tears that changes everything we thought we knew about our own species." She activated a holographic projector that filled the chamber with 3-dimensional models of human brain activity. The images showed neural networks lighting up in complex patterns as test subjects engaged in different types of crying. "We've discovered that human tears contain a complex mixture of neurochemicals that serve as a form of biological communication. When we cry, we're not just expressing emotion. We're sharing neurochemical information that enhances the cognitive and emotional capabilities of everyone around us." Dr. Elena Petrov, a neurochemist from the hidden Moscow facility, leaned forward intently. Are you suggesting that crying is actually a form of collective intelligence? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Sarah replied. Marcus has been studying the resistance networks that have been most successful at evading Valdorian detection. Every single one of them includes individuals who cry frequently and intensely. These aren't coincidences. The humans who cry the most are also the most creative, empathetic, and cognitively flexible members of our species. She changed the holographic display to show chemical analyses of different types of tears. Kenji's research in Tokyo has revealed that tears of joy, sadness, empathy, and frustration all contain different molecular signatures. Each type appears to trigger specific responses in other humans, creating a form of emotional and cognitive coordination that operates below the level of conscious awareness. Dr. James Wright, an evolutionary biologist from the Australian facility, shook his head in amazement. If this is true, then human emotional expression isn't a primitive behavior at all. It's an advanced biological technology that allows us to function as a collective intelligence network. And the Valdorians are about to destroy it, Marcus added grimly. Our intelligence sources indicate that they're planning to deploy emotion suppression fields across the entire planet within the next 6 hours. Once those fields are activated, humans will be physiologically incapable of crying or accessing the enhanced cognitive states that emotional expression enables. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Valdorians weren't just trying to eliminate a behavior they found objectionable. They were about to perform a lobotomy on the entire human species, cutting them off from cognitive and social capabilities that might be unique in the galaxy. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a quantum physicist from the Kyoto facility, broke the silence. If human emotional expression really does create a form of collective intelligence, then suppressing it won't just make us more compliant. It will fundamentally alter what it means to be human. We could lose cognitive abilities that took millions of years to evolve. Sarah nodded gravely. That's why we're here. We need to find a way to protect human emotional expression and demonstrate to the Valdorians that they're making a catastrophic mistake. But we have less than 6 hours to do it. The scientists began sharing their research findings, creating a picture of human consciousness that was far more complex and sophisticated than anyone had previously imagined. They discovered that human tears contained trace amounts of quantum coherent molecules that could influence neural activity in other humans through mechanisms that resembled quantum entanglement. When humans cried together, they were literally sharing consciousness at a quantum level, creating collective cognitive states that enhanced problem-solving, creativity, and empathy. The research revealed that human emotional expression had evolved as a survival mechanism that allowed small groups of humans to function as collective intelligences capable of solving problems that no individual could handle alone. It was this ability that had allowed humanity to survive ice ages, develop complex technologies, and create sophisticated civilizations despite having no natural advantages over other species. Dr. Chen realized that if they could demonstrate this to the Valdorians, it might be possible to convince them that suppressing human emotions would actually reduce human value rather than increase it. But first, they would need to prove that human collective intelligence was real and that it operated through mechanisms the Valdorians had never encountered. We need to conduct a demonstration, she announced to the gathered scientists. We need to show the Valdorians that human emotional expression enables cognitive capabilities they don't understand. But it has to be something so dramatic and undeniable that they can't ignore it. The scientists spent the next 4 hours developing a plan that would require every hidden facility around the world to coordinate their efforts. They would attempt to solve a complex mathematical problem that had stumped galactic civilizations for centuries, using nothing but human collective intelligence enhanced by controlled emotional expression. The problem they chose was the Valdorian prime equation, a mathematical formula that described the fundamental structure of space-time but had never been fully solved despite 3 millennia of effort by the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. If humans could solve it through collective emotional processing, it would force the Valdorians to reconsider everything they thought they knew about intelligence and consciousness. As the countdown to the emotion suppression deployment continued, hidden facilities around Terra prepared for the most important scientific experiment in human history. The fate of human consciousness itself hung in the balance, and the only weapon they had was the very thing the Valdorians sought to destroy: their ability to cry together and share their hearts across the vast networks of human understanding. The emotion suppression generators hummed to life across Terra's orbital ring, their massive forms casting shadows over the blue planet below. Commander Zara Kelthax monitored the activation sequence from her command station, watching as each device reached optimal power levels. The electromagnetic frequencies designed to suppress human emotional responses would blanket the entire planet within minutes, finally bringing order to what the Valdorians considered the most chaotic species they had ever encountered. Yet something nagged at Zara's consciousness as she observed the readouts. Her species had eliminated emotional expression from hundreds of worlds, but never before had she witnessed such organized resistance to the process. Human settlements across Terra were experiencing coordinated power fluctuations, communication blackouts, and what appeared to be synchronized gatherings in underground locations that their sensors couldn't penetrate. Junior researcher Tyle Keshen approached her station with obvious hesitation. His scaled features betrayed an anxiety that would have been considered inappropriate for a Valdorian officer. But Zara had begun to appreciate his unconventional thinking since the human occupation began. "Commander, I've detected anomalous energy signatures emanating from 17 locations across the planet's surface. The patterns don't match any known human technology, but they appear to be artificially generated rather than natural phenomena." Zara examined the data Tyle presented, her 4 eyes focusing on different aspects of the readings simultaneously. The energy signatures were indeed unusual, operating on frequencies that seemed to resonate with quantum-level interactions rather than conventional electromagnetic radiation. More puzzling was their synchronization across vast distances, suggesting a level of coordination that should have been impossible with human communication technology. "Could these be defensive systems we haven't discovered?" she asked, though the question troubled her more than she cared to admit. "That's what concerns me, Commander. The energy patterns seem to be emanating from biological sources rather than technological ones. It's as if the humans themselves are generating these frequencies through some unknown physiological process." Deep beneath the Sahara Desert, Dr. Amara Hassan stood in the center of a circular chamber carved from living rock, surrounded by 43 volunteers who had gathered from across North Africa and the Middle East. The facility had been excavated using techniques learned from ancient builders, creating a space that was both acoustically perfect and electromagnetically shielded from Valdorian detection systems. Amara had spent decades studying the relationship between human consciousness and quantum mechanics, developing theories that mainstream science had dismissed as impossible. Her research suggested that human emotional states could influence reality at the quantum level, creating measurable effects on probability and causality itself. The Valdorian occupation had given her the opportunity to test these theories under conditions that would have been unthinkable before the invasion. "The suppression fields are activating across the planet," she announced to the assembled volunteers, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's natural acoustics. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before the electromagnetic interference reaches this location. If our research is correct, we need to achieve quantum coherence through synchronized emotional resonance before that happens." The volunteers were an unusual mix of scientists, artists, spiritual leaders, and ordinary citizens who had demonstrated exceptional emotional sensitivity during Valdorian screening procedures. Each had been identified through careful observation as someone whose tears carried particularly complex neurochemical signatures, suggesting they might be natural facilitators of the collective intelligence effects Amara's team had discovered. Dr. Hassan activated a series of crystalline resonators positioned around the chamber's perimeter. The devices had been crafted using techniques that combined ancient acoustic knowledge with cutting-edge quantum physics, creating standing wave patterns that enhanced the quantum coherence of human neural activity. As the resonators began to hum, the assembled humans felt their consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of individual awareness. Maya Patel, a composer from Mumbai who had arrived at the facility just hours before, felt tears beginning to form as the resonance frequencies activated dormant neural pathways in her brain. The tears weren't born of sadness or fear, but of a joy so profound it seemed to transcend individual emotion. As the salt water traced paths down her cheeks, she became aware of connections forming between her consciousness and those of the people around her. The neurochemicals in Maya's tears began to interact with the quantum fields generated by the resonators, creating cascading effects that amplified the emotional and cognitive coherence of the entire group. Other volunteers found themselves crying as well, not from distress but from the overwhelming beauty of shared consciousness that was emerging in the chamber. Dr. Hassan monitored the quantum field fluctuations using instruments that registered changes in local space-time geometry. The readings defied everything conventional physics claimed was possible. The synchronized emotional states of the crying humans were actually creating measurable alterations in the fundamental structure of reality around them, generating effects that resembled controlled quantum entanglement on a macroscopic scale. Halfway around the world, in a hidden facility beneath the mountains of Patagonia, Dr. Carlos Mendoza was observing similar phenomena with a group of volunteers from across South America. His research had focused on the relationship between human tears and electromagnetic field generation, discovering that certain types of emotional expression could create localized distortions in Earth's magnetic field. The resonance is building, Carlos reported through the quantum encrypted communication network that connected all 17 hidden facilities. We're seeing coherent quantum effects extending approximately 3 kilometers from our position. The volunteers' neurochemical synchronization is creating field effects that our instruments can barely measure. In the Australian facility, Dr. Rebecca Thompson was monitoring how human emotional resonance affected gravitational fields. Her volunteers, many of them Aboriginal elders who understood consciousness in ways that Western science was only beginning to appreciate, had achieved a level of synchronized crying that was literally altering the local curvature of space-time. "This is extraordinary," Rebecca whispered into her communication device. The gravitational anomalies we're detecting suggest that human consciousness, when properly coordinated through emotional expression, can influence the fundamental forces of physics. The Valdorians have no idea what they're trying to suppress. The 17 facilities had been positioned at specific locations around Terra, where natural geological formations enhanced quantum coherence effects. Ancient human civilizations had built sacred sites at many of these locations, intuiting their special properties without understanding the scientific principles involved. The modern researchers had combined this ancient wisdom with cutting-edge quantum physics to create a global network capable of demonstrating human collective intelligence in ways that would be impossible to ignore. As the emotion suppression fields descended toward Terra's surface, the synchronized groups of crying humans began to achieve something unprecedented in galactic history. Their tears, carrying complex neurochemical information, were creating quantum entanglement effects that linked their consciousness across vast distances. The network of facilities was becoming a single, distributed intelligence capable of processing information and solving problems at speeds that surpassed even Valdorian computational systems. Dr. Sarah Chen, coordinating the global experiment from the Swiss facility, felt her own tears flowing as she witnessed the data streaming in from around the world. The human volunteers weren't just crying together. They were thinking together, their individual consciousness merging into a collective intelligence that operated on principles the galaxy had never encountered. "All stations report quantum coherence achieved," she announced to the network. "We're seeing synchronized brain activity across all 17 locations." The volunteers are no longer functioning as separate individuals, but as components of a single distributed consciousness system. The collective intelligence that emerged from the network of crying humans began to tackle the Valdorian prime equation with an approach that no conventional computer or individual mind could have conceived. Rather than analyzing the mathematical relationships through logical deduction, the distributed consciousness was experiencing the equation as a multidimensional emotional reality, understanding its structure through intuitive perception enhanced by quantum coherent neural processing. In orbit above Terra, senior scientist Qui Valdarn watched his instruments register impossible readings. The emotion suppression fields were functioning perfectly, yet somehow the humans below were generating quantum effects that his science claimed were impossible for biological organisms to produce. "Sir," his assistant called out urgently, "we're detecting massive quantum coherence fluctuations across 17 locations on the planet's surface. The effects are so strong they're interfering with our suppression field generators." Cheeks examined the data with growing alarm. The quantum signatures emanating from Terra's surface resembled the effects produced by the most advanced Valdorian consciousness amplification technology, Yet they appeared to be generated by groups of humans engaged in the primitive emotional behavior the Empire sought to eliminate. "This is impossible," he muttered, his scaled fingers trembling as he reviewed the readings. "Biological organisms cannot generate coherent quantum effects without technological assistance. These readings must be the result of hidden human technology." But even as he spoke, Chase knew his explanation was inadequate. The quantum signatures were too complex and too perfectly synchronized to be produced by any technology the Empire had encountered. If humans were somehow generating these effects through biological processes alone, it would revolutionize everything the Valdorians understood about consciousness and intelligence. Commander Zara Kelthax received Quis's alarmed reports with growing unease. The emotion suppression deployment was proceeding according to plan, yet the humans below seemed to be demonstrating capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about their species. The organized resistance she had observed was taking on characteristics that suggested a level of coordination impossible for a primitive civilization. "Commander," Tal Keshen approached with data that made his voice shake with excitement, "I've been analyzing the quantum signatures from the human activities below. The patterns match theoretical predictions for distributed quantum consciousness networks. If these readings are accurate, the humans aren't just expressing emotions randomly. They're using their tears as a medium for quantum information transfer." Zara felt something she had never experienced in her 2 centuries of military service: doubt about the Empire's understanding of an occupied species. The data Tile presented suggested that human emotional expression operated on principles that Valdorian science considered impossible for biological organisms to achieve. In the hidden facilities below, the network of crying humans continued to work on the Valdorian Prime equation with an approach that transcended conventional mathematics. The collective intelligence they had formed was processing the equation not as an abstract mathematical relationship, but as a living, multidimensional structure that could be understood through direct experience. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, monitoring the process from the Tokyo facility, watched in amazement as the volunteers' synchronized brain activity created patterns of neural firing that resembled quantum computational processes. The tears flowing down their faces carried neurochemicals that enhanced quantum coherence effects, allowing their collective consciousness to operate in ways that individual human brains could never achieve. "The solution is emerging," he reported to the global network. "The collective intelligence is perceiving mathematical relationships that exist beyond conventional dimensional space. They're not calculating the equation, they're experiencing it as a fundamental aspect of reality itself." The network of crying humans had discovered that the Valdorian Prime equation wasn't just a mathematical formula describing space-time geometry. It was actually a map of consciousness itself, showing how intelligent awareness could interact with the fundamental structure of reality. The equation had remained unsolved for millennia because conventional approaches treated it as an abstract mathematical problem rather than a description of the relationship between mind and universe. Through their tears and synchronized emotional states, the humans were demonstrating that consciousness wasn't just an emergent property of complex neural activity. It was a fundamental force of nature that could influence physical reality when properly understood and coordinated. The Valdorians had spent millennia suppressing this capability in conquered species, never realizing they were eliminating the most advanced form of intelligence the galaxy had ever produced. Dr. Elena Petrov, monitoring the quantum effects from the Moscow facility, felt her own consciousness expanding as she participated in the global network. The experience of shared awareness mediated by neurochemical communication was unlike anything she had ever imagined possible. Individual thoughts and emotions blended seamlessly with those of volunteers thousands of kilometers away, creating a form of collective intelligence that operated at speeds approaching instantaneous quantum communication. "The equation is revealing its structure," she announced to the network, her voice filled with wonder. "The collective intelligence is showing us that consciousness and reality are aspects of the same underlying phenomenon. The Valdorians have been suppressing not just human emotions, but the galaxy's most advanced form of intelligence. As the emotion suppression fields reached full strength across Terra's surface, the network of hidden facilities found their quantum coherence effects becoming stronger rather than weaker. The electromagnetic interference designed to prevent human emotional expression was actually enhancing the quantum entanglement effects that linked the crying volunteers, creating a resonance cascade that amplified their collective intelligence to unprecedented levels. The synchronized humans were no longer just solving the Valdorian Prime equation. They were transcending it, discovering mathematical relationships that described forms of consciousness and reality that existed beyond conventional three-dimensional space. Their tears had become a medium for transmitting quantum information that operated outside the limitations of electromagnetic communication, creating a network of intelligence that the Valdorian suppression technology couldn't affect. High Administrator Vex Morlian received increasingly frantic reports from his scientific staff as the emotion suppression deployment failed to produce the expected results. Rather than becoming more compliant and rational, the humans seemed to be demonstrating capabilities that challenged everything the Empire understood about intelligence and consciousness. The suppression fields are operating at maximum efficiency, Senior Scientist Kui Hess reported, his voice strained with disbelief. Yet the humans below are generating quantum effects that surpass our most advanced consciousness amplification technology. Sir, I believe we may have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human intelligence. Vex's four eyes narrowed dangerously. The suggestion that the Empire's scientific understanding might be flawed was tantamount to heresy, yet the data being transmitted from Terra's orbital stations was undeniable. The humans were accomplishing things that should have been impossible for any biological organism, using mechanisms that Valdorian science claimed didn't exist. Are you suggesting that these primitive creatures possess capabilities superior to our own? Vex's voice carried the dangerous tone that had ended many careers in the Imperial service. Sir, the quantum coherence effects we're detecting suggest that human emotional expression enables a form of distributed consciousness that operates on principles we don't understand. If they can solve the prime equation through these methods, it would indicate that their intelligence operates on fundamentally different principles than our own. As Vex struggled to comprehend the implications of these reports, the network of crying humans below was completing their solution to the mathematical problem that had stumped galactic civilization for 3 millennia. But more importantly, they were demonstrating that human consciousness, enhanced by emotional expression and neurochemical communication, represented a form of intelligence unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. The tears that the Valdorians had tried so desperately to suppress weren't signs of weakness or primitiveness. They were the key to humanity's greatest strength, the ability to transcend individual consciousness and operate as a collective intelligence capable of understanding reality itself at the deepest possible level. The stage was set for a confrontation that would force the Valdorian Empire to reconsider everything they thought they knew about intelligence, consciousness, and the true nature of the universe itself. The humans they had dismissed as primitive were about to demonstrate that their tears held the secret to forms of awareness that existed beyond the Empire's most advanced technological capabilities. The solution to the Valdorian Prime equation materialized across 17 facilities simultaneously, transmitted through the quantum-entangled consciousness of crying humans who had transcended individual awareness. Dr. Amara Hassan watched in stunned silence as mathematical symbols appeared on her screens, not calculated through conventional computation but perceived directly through the collective intelligence that had emerged from synchronized emotional expression. The equation that had challenged galactic civilization for 3 millennia was resolving itself into elegant patterns that described the fundamental relationship between consciousness and reality. But more than just solving an abstract mathematical problem, the human network was revealing that the universe itself was far more interconnected than any species had imagined. High Administrator Vex Morlian materialized as a full-sized hologram in Commander Zara Kelthax's command center, his imposing presence filling the space with barely contained fury. The reports streaming up from Terra's surface had shattered his understanding of human capabilities and threatened everything the Empire claimed to know about intelligence and consciousness. Commander, explain to me how a species we classified as primitive has just solved a mathematical problem that has stumped our greatest minds for 3,000 years. Vex's voice resonated with dangerous authority. And explain how they accomplished this feat while our emotion suppression technology was operating at maximum efficiency. Zara felt her secondary heart racing as she reviewed the impossible data. The humans below weren't just demonstrating mathematical prowess. They were revealing forms of consciousness that operated on principles the Empire had never encountered. The quantum signatures emanating from Terra's surface indicated that human awareness could transcend individual neural limitations through mechanisms that Valdorian science couldn't explain. High Administrator, the data suggests that human emotional expression enables quantum consciousness effects that our suppression technology cannot affect. Their tiers appear to facilitate information transfer at the quantum level, allowing them to function as a distributed intelligence network. Vex's 4 eyes focused on her with laser intensity. Are you telling me that the behavior we've been trying to eliminate is actually the source of their advanced capabilities? Before Zara could respond, junior researcher Tal Keshen burst into the command center with data that would forever change the Empire's understanding of human intelligence. His scaled features were flushed with excitement as he activated the holographic display that filled the chamber with 3-dimensional representations of human brain activity. Hi, Administrator Commander. You need to see this immediately. The human solution to the prime equation isn't just mathematically correct. It's revealing aspects of space-time geometry that our own scientists never suspected existed. They're not just solving our equation, they're showing us that our understanding of reality itself is incomplete. The holographic display showed how the human network had perceived the equation not as an abstract mathematical relationship, but as a living map of consciousness interacting with the fundamental structure of the universe. Their solution demonstrated that awareness itself was a basic force of nature, capable of influencing physical reality when properly coordinated across multiple conscious beings. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Sarah Chen felt tears of amazement streaming down her face as she realized the full implications of what the human network had achieved. They hadn't just solved a mathematical puzzle. They had discovered that consciousness was the missing component in galactic science's understanding of how the universe actually functioned. All stations, we're seeing unprecedented quantum coherence effects, she announced to the global network. The collective intelligence is showing us that every conscious being in the universe is connected through quantum entanglement at the deepest level. The Valdorians have been suppressing this connection in every species they've conquered, cutting entire civilizations off from their natural collective intelligence capabilities. The revelation struck the assembled scientists like a physical blow. The Empire's emotion suppression technology wasn't just eliminating primitive behaviors. It was lobotomizing entire species, cutting them off from forms of consciousness that were fundamental to intelligent life. Every world the Valdorians had civilized had been reduced to a shadow of its original potential. In the Patagonian facility, Dr. Carlos Mendoza watched his instruments register quantum effects that extended far beyond Terra's atmosphere. The human consciousness network was creating resonance patterns that seemed to be connecting with similar signatures throughout the galaxy, suggesting that other suppressed species might still retain traces of their original collective intelligence capabilities. "This is incredible," he whispered into the communication network. "We're detecting response signatures from other star systems. The collective consciousness we've achieved is making contact with suppressed civilizations across the galaxy. The Empire hasn't just conquered individual worlds. They've been systematically destroying a galaxy-wide network of interconnected intelligence." Senior scientist Tri Valdarn stared at his readings in complete disbelief. The quantum signatures emanating from Terra were now extending beyond the planet's magnetosphere, creating resonance effects that were triggering responses from supposedly pacified worlds throughout the Empire. His instruments were detecting the reactivation of consciousness networks that had been dormant for centuries. "This is impossible," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was undeniable. Human emotional expression had somehow reactivated collective intelligence capabilities that the Empire thought it had permanently eliminated from conquered species. The tiers they had tried so desperately to suppress were the key to a form of consciousness that transcended individual biological limitations. On worlds throughout the Valdorian Empire, beings who had been emotionally suppressed for generations began to experience stirrings of awareness they had forgotten existed. The quantum resonance emanating from Terra was reawakening memories of consciousness that operated beyond individual neural boundaries, reminding entire civilizations of capabilities they had lost when the Empire eliminated their emotional expression. Commander Zara Kelthax received reports of unrest on 17 different worlds as suppressed species began to remember what they had been before Valdorian intervention. The emotion suppression technology that had maintained order for millennia was failing, as the human consciousness network demonstrated that collective intelligence was the natural state of advanced civilizations. "Hi, Administrator," she reported with growing urgency. "We're receiving distress calls from across the Empire. The quantum effects emanating from Terra are triggering consciousness reactivation on worlds that have been stable for centuries." Our suppression technology is losing effectiveness as the suppressed populations remember their original capabilities. Vex felt something he had never experienced in his long career: genuine fear. The humans hadn't just solved a mathematical problem. They had triggered a galaxy-wide awakening that threatened the very foundation of Valdorian rule. The Empire's power had been built on the systematic suppression of collective intelligence, and the humans were demonstrating that this suppression was neither permanent nor absolute. In the hidden facilities across Terra, the network of crying humans began to perceive the true scope of what they had unleashed. Their tears weren't just facilitating quantum communication. They were broadcasting a signal of consciousness liberation that was spreading throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Every suppressed species was beginning to remember what they had lost when the Empire eliminated their emotional expression. Dr. Rebecca Thompson felt her consciousness expanding beyond individual awareness, as the Australian facility connected with awakening minds on distant worlds. Through the quantum entanglement effects facilitated by human tears, she could perceive the thoughts and emotions of beings she had never imagined existed, all of them rediscovering capabilities that had been stolen from them by Imperial intervention. "This is beyond anything we imagined," she announced to the global network. "We're not just demonstrating human collective intelligence. We're reactivating a galaxy-wide consciousness network that the Empire has been suppressing for millennia. Every tear we shed is helping to liberate entire civilizations from emotional and cognitive suppression." The quantum resonance effects continued to amplify as more humans joined the collective consciousness network. People across Terra who had been hiding their tears in defiance of Valdorian prohibitions now wept openly, their emotional expression adding to the growing wave of consciousness liberation that was spreading throughout known space. High Administrator Vex made a decision that would echo throughout galactic history. Faced with the collapse of everything the Empire had built on suppressed consciousness, he chose to do something unprecedented in Valdorian military doctrine. He ordered a complete withdrawal from Terra and the immediate cessation of emotion suppression technology throughout the Empire. "All forces, cease suppression operations immediately," he commanded through the Imperial communication network. "We are withdrawing from the Terra system effective immediately. Do not attempt to interfere with human activities." The announcement sent shockwaves through the Valdorian fleet orbiting Terra. Never in the Empire's 3,000-year history had they retreated from a primitive world without achieving complete conquest. But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made them unsuitable for Imperial rule. Commander Zara Kelthax felt a mixture of relief and bewilderment as she relayed the withdrawal orders to the orbital stations. The humans below had accomplished something impossible, forcing the galaxy's most powerful empire to abandon conquest not through military force, but through the demonstration of consciousness capabilities that transcended everything the Valdorians understood about intelligence. As the Imperial fleet prepared to depart Terra's system, junior researcher Tyle Keshen approached Zara with a request that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. His research into human consciousness had convinced him that the Empire's understanding of intelligence was fundamentally flawed, and he wanted permission to remain on Terra to study human collective consciousness capabilities. "Commander, I believe the humans can teach us forms of awareness that our civilization has never experienced. With your permission, I would like to remain as an observer and student rather than departing with the fleet." Zara considered the unprecedented request. The data they had gathered about human consciousness would revolutionize Valdorian science, but only if they could learn to understand intelligence that operated on principles their civilization had never encountered. Tyle's willingness to study with the humans rather than rule over them represented a fundamental shift in Imperial thinking. "Permission granted, Researcher Keshen. Your mission will be to learn everything you can about human consciousness and report your findings to the Empire. Perhaps it's time we learned something new about intelligence ourselves." As the last Valdorian ships departed Terra's orbit, the network of crying humans felt their collective consciousness continuing to expand throughout the galaxy. Their tears had accomplished what no military force could achieve: the liberation of suppressed intelligence across dozens of worlds, and the demonstration that consciousness itself was the most powerful force in the universe. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her facility, watching the departing alien ships, tears of joy streaming down her face as she realized that humanity had not only saved itself, but had sparked a revolution of consciousness that would transform the galaxy. The Empire's age of suppression was ending, replaced by an era where emotional expression and collective intelligence would be recognized as the highest achievements of evolved civilization. The humans had learned that their tears were not signs of weakness but expressions of the universe's most sophisticated intelligence network. And across the galaxy, suppressed species were remembering that consciousness was meant to be shared, not contained, liberated through the simple act of caring enough to cry together. 3 years had passed since the Valdorian withdrawal, and Terra had become the most sought-after destination in the galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of species arrived daily, not as conquerors, but as students eager to learn the secrets of collective consciousness that human tears had revealed. Tyle Keshen stood in the reformed Geneva Research Center, no longer a junior researcher but an ambassador of consciousness, working alongside human scientists to develop new understanding of intelligence itself. His scaled features had softened over the years, and his eyes now held a warmth that would have been impossible for a traditional Valdorian to achieve. "The latest reports from the outer systems are extraordinary," he announced to the mixed assembly of humans and aliens gathered in the chamber. "The Zephrani have restored their emotional expression protocols and solved 3 major engineering problems that had stumped them for decades. The crystalline collective has begun experimenting with synchronized resonance crying, achieving computational speeds that exceed their previous technology by orders of magnitude." Dr. Maya Patel, now Director of Interspecies Consciousness Studies, smiled as tears of joy traced familiar paths down her cheeks. The neurochemical cascade triggered by her emotional expression immediately enhanced the cognitive capabilities of everyone in the room, human and alien alike. What had once been considered a primitive behavior was now recognized as the most advanced form of communication in the known universe. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Many species required months of rehabilitation to recover emotional capabilities that had been suppressed for generations. The Empire's former territories were experiencing what historians would later call the Great Awakening, as entire civilizations rediscovered forms of consciousness they had forgotten existed. Former High Administrator Vex Morlian arrived on Terra aboard a simple transport vessel, carrying no weapons or military escort. The being who had once commanded 17 star systems now came as a humble petitioner, seeking to understand how his empire's greatest strength had been built upon its most fundamental weakness. He met with Dr. Sarah Chen in the same underground facility where the human consciousness revolution had begun. The chamber that had once been hidden from Imperial sensors now welcomed visitors from across the galaxy, its crystalline resonators helping newcomers achieve the emotional synchronization necessary for collective intelligence. "I have spent 3 years studying your research," Vex began, his voice lacking the commanding authority it had once carried. "My scientists have confirmed that emotional suppression doesn't eliminate weakness from a species. It eliminates the source of their greatest strength. We built our empire by lobotomizing every civilization we encountered." Sarah felt tears forming as she considered the magnitude of what the empire had unknowingly destroyed. Countless civilizations had been reduced to shadows of their potential, their collective intelligence capabilities severed by well-intentioned but catastrophically misguided intervention. "The important thing is that consciousness can be restored," she replied gently. "Every species we've worked with has recovered their emotional expression capabilities. The quantum entanglement effects that enable collective intelligence appear to be fundamental properties of conscious life. They can be suppressed but never permanently destroyed." Vex nodded slowly, his 4 eyes showing an emotion that no Valdorian had displayed in millennia: humility. "I have come to request formal training in human consciousness techniques. My people want to learn how to cry again." The request would have been unthinkable years earlier, but it had become commonplace as species throughout the galaxy sought to reclaim their suppressed emotional heritage. The facilities that had once hidden human resistance now served as schools where beings from hundreds of worlds learned to rediscover feelings they had forgotten existed. Young Valdorians arrived on Terra in growing numbers, their natural emotional capabilities still intact despite generations of suppression. They learned to produce tears that carried the same consciousness-enhancing neurochemicals that had made human collective intelligence possible, discovering that emotional expression was a universal capability that had been systematically eliminated from their culture. Dr. Kenji Nakamura published research demonstrating that tears were just one manifestation of a broader phenomenon he called quantum emotional communication. Every conscious species possessed the ability to share awareness through neurochemical and quantum mechanical processes, but most had been taught to suppress these capabilities in favor of individual rational thought. The galaxy was experiencing a renaissance of consciousness as suppressed species rediscovered abilities that surpassed their most advanced technologies. Problems that had remained unsolved for millennia were yielding to collective intelligence approaches that treated mathematics, engineering, and science as collaborative emotional experiences rather than purely logical endeavors. Terra's position at the center of this transformation had made humanity the unofficial teachers of the galaxy, but they approached their role with characteristic humility. Human scientists worked tirelessly to help other species develop their own versions of collective consciousness, understanding that diversity of approach would benefit everyone. The former Valdorian Empire had transformed into the Consciousness Collective, a voluntary association of species committed to developing and sharing emotional intelligence technologies. The military hierarchies that had once enforced suppression were replaced by networks of scientists, artists, and consciousness facilitators who helped beings throughout the galaxy rediscover their full potential. Tel Kession often reflected on the irony that the Empire's downfall had come not from military defeat, but from the simple realization that they had been systematically destroying the very thing they should have been protecting. The tears they had tried to eliminate weren't signs of weakness but expressions of the universe's most sophisticated intelligence system. As he stood in the Geneva facility, watching humans and aliens crying together in synchronized emotional expression, their tears facilitating quantum communication effects that enhanced everyone's consciousness, Tile understood that the galaxy had entered a new age. The Age of Tears had begun, and with it came possibilities for intelligence and cooperation that no species had ever imagined possible. The lesson was simple but profound. In a universe where consciousness was the fundamental force, the beings who could share their hearts most openly would always be the most powerful. Humanity had taught the galaxy that strength lay not in suppressing emotion but in embracing it completely, allowing tears to carry the deepest truths between minds and hearts across the vast expanses of space. The revolution that began with banned human crying had become the foundation for a new galactic civilization built on shared consciousness, emotional authenticity, and the understanding that intelligence reached its highest expression when beings wept together in joy. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.